Hello everyone. This week I'm going to be talking about magazine feature design. This is important because your first project is designing a magazine feature. So we're going to go over the anatomy of the magazine. I think this is a good place to start. I think it's pretty simple to understand because most people have seen, read, looked at a magazine at some point. So this isn't going to be groundbreaking, but I'm going to kind of cover it quickly. But the key area is talking about the actual style of the magazine feature because the design of the feature section is quite different than the rest of the publication. So let's go ahead and start with the cover. Everyone knows this because this is what you see, of course, on newsstands or if you get magazines mailed to your house or if you see them at the library. And the cover usually has some key elements. The first is the masthead. This is going to be the name of the publication. So in this case, it's Esquire. It's usually done in a font that's not used anywhere else in the magazine because it has to do with the branding of the publication. Makes it recognizable, of course. And it also means that it will be distinct on the cover and you won't get distracted by the other elements thinking that they are, the name of the publication. The next is we always have a main image. So if we're looking at most consumer magazines that are geared at men or women, it's typically going to be a celebrity. A little fun fact for you, Alexis Bledel was the first actress to grace the cover of Girls Life magazine. Before that, they only used real girls, so everyday girls, on the cover of their publication. A lot of people saw it as selling out, but a lot of people who work in the industry, of course, knew that it would attract new readers to the publication. In addition, we have the lead article cover line. This is usually going to be the largest in size, and sometimes they're going to use a color to highlight it like they do here with the orange in the title, Owen Wilson. So sometimes the title is just the person's name, and then the rest of the information for that cover line is going to be Owen Wilson is doing great, thanks. So you can see they use orange in other places. This creates nice spot color and helps to highlight some interesting elements on the cover. We also have supporting cover lines. Different magazines do these in different styles. Sometimes they're all the same size and sometimes they are a variety of sizes to create a sense of hierarchy of what would be the next most prominent story, then the next most prominent story. And then there's usually a few other items here. This might include the magazine deck. This is like its little tagline, if you will, that's typically right under the masthead. Sometimes they put it on the spine now. And then typically there's also going to be a date and issue. It is either on the top right-hand side underneath the masthead, on the bottom left-hand side, or on the spine. Sometimes it's in multiple spots. And the last item is the price and barcode. If you have a magazine mailed to you, you might not have the price and barcode on it, but typically if you don't have it mailed to you, it will be on the front. This just makes it easier for checkouts. Next up, we have the table of contents. This is often referred to in the industry as TOC, which stands, of course, for table of contents, beginning of the T, the O, and the C. Typically, a table of contents is 1 to 2 pages, depending on the size of the magazine. And you will notice that it often includes a variety of pictures of varying sizes. There's typically going to be one photo that is kind of your focal point. And then after that, you have key elements, which are going to be the page numbers, the slugs for the title of the articles, and sometimes a little description, depending on if it is a reoccurring section that everyone knows what that is, or if it is a specific article in that recurring section that they want to highlight, or of course in the feature well. I really like table of contents and think they're critical and should be well designed because they're basically a roadmap for your whole publication. Next up, we have the department pages. I mentioned this in my welcome video. So department pages are typically at the front and back of magazines, and their purpose is to basically act as material that happens over and over again, often referred to as recurring departments or recurring information. And we do this because then we have elements that our readers can expect. So if you're reading, say, Bon Appetit magazine like we see here, you know that every month they're going to have the same set of articles at the beginning, and they're going to include things like the meal plan. And so typically it's 5 different recipes that are weeknight dinners that are quick and easy. So you have that to look forward to. So you are like, oh, I can't wait to see what the new weekly dinners are going to be. In the back, they usually have a section that focuses more on tools that are used in the kitchen or appliances that are used in the kitchen. The nice thing from a design perspective is these are very structured pages. So they are easy to design month after month because you usually have a couple of different options in those mods like I talked about in newspapers. We have those in magazine as well. Some people don't like these from a design perspective because they can feel kind of dry. And if your whole job is just designing department pages, it definitely is not nearly as fun as if you're designing the cover and the feature well. Oftentimes these will have multiple stories on them or stories that are broken into multiple elements. This is one of my favorites from a more recent Cosmopolitan magazine, just because I like the use of the bright color of green. I think it's young, I think it's fun, and you don't see a lot of lime green, but I also like the structure. Typically, I wouldn't be into such narrow columns because I don't think they provide a lot of readability. However, I think it works for this because it's not that long of an article and they're used kind of highlight different sections of the story. Next up is what I think is the most important part of this lecture, which is looking at the feature. There's typically 1 to 3 features in any publication, depending on its size, or magazine publication, depending on its size. It's typically a long form story. It may not be told in the long form narrative style that is linear, but typically it is longer in format. It may have multiple elements to it. They're always going to have a 2-page opening spread. Advertisements do not go in the feature well. This has been a mainstay since the beginning of magazine that continues through today. In addition, to having that 2-page spread, what you're looking to do is create consistent style within that story. That means you're not going to use a font once and then we're never going to see it again unless it is the font used for the title or the headline. Of course, we have to make sure that we're focusing on the text. That's a critical part. So there's going to be more than just text on any page. If you have a page that's just text and the page across from it is just text, it's not a magazine at that point, it's a book. So you want to be very careful when you're designing these and you're thinking about the balance of your pages and making sure you're providing some good variety for the eyes. Next is making sure that you have that folio line on there. That is also a typical structure for any magazine. The only time we don't put a folio on a page is if we have a full page photo. So if the photo goes all the way to the edge, in the section where the folio would typically go, then you're not going to include it. This is also true on things like advertisements. So the folio, of course, is going to include the page number and typically the magazine name, or if it's something like Southern Living, they use sl.com, I believe, on their folio. So just make sure when you're picking out your magazine, you take a look to see their typical style so that you can use that style to guide you. Let's talk about the opening spread, because this is typically where people struggle the most, because really, most people want to put way too much text on there. Typically, the opening spread of a feature story is going to be photo-driven. Sometimes it is text-driven, but it's graphic text, not body text. But for us, we're really going to focus on a photo-driven feature. In addition to having that photo, you're going to need to have a headline and or a title, depending on what you call it. In the newspaper business, we typically call it a headline, but in magazines, we usually call it a title. But it kind of depends on who you're working for and what their background is as well. So making sure you have that title, and that title should be pretty large, and it should be a graphic element, not just there to tell us the name of the publication. It is or the name of the story. It is there as part of the design, the look and feel. And choosing the right font and making it the appropriate size and making it a good color will tell your reader a lot about the story, because type will create a mood, a style, a time period. It has a lot of power that people really don't think about. Next up, we have the deck or subhead. This is going to be something that gives a little bit more information about your headline if it isn't abundantly clear what this story is going to be about just from looking at the headline. Next up, we have the byline. So the byline for us is including the writer and the writers too. There's 2 of them, and the photographer. So make sure that you're including both of those names on the front of your spread. And last but not least, of course, you're going to have that folio line. So let's take a look at one. This is from Cosmopolitan magazine. Of course, you might recognize this goddess, but it is a really fun and kind of stylistic opening spread. Once again, this is from Cosmopolitan magazine, and I really love the style that they've been doing for the last year or so. I think it's fun and it's fresh, and they're just trying new things. So you can see here we have the headline, "It's All Good." Highlight it for you. But if you were just to read that headline, you wouldn't really know a lot about what is going on in this story. It's all good. What does that mean? So while it's fun and it's big, and I want you to take a minute to look at the style, because we're going to see a repetition of the style in just a couple minutes, it's not enough to tell us what this story is about. Of course, we have some recognizability with the woman here on the front of our feature spread, but we do need to provide a little bit more information to know what Venus is up to. Why is it all good with her? So you'll see here that we have a subhead or a deck, depending on who you work for, that gives us a little bit more information about how she's knocking out of the park, not just on the court, but also in other areas of life. I also thought this was a good tribute to her. In addition to that, we have our byline information. You will notice that there is more byline information here than we have typically, especially for something like what we're working on, where we just have 2 writers and a photographer. In this case, we have a writer, and then we have photographers, we have stylists, we have a lot of more information, but all these people need to have credits. After that, you can see on the bottom left-hand corner, we have a folio line included. So Cosmopolitan does sometimes include a folio line even when they have a full bleed photo. Usually it's just to help the reader understand where they are in the publication. Next up, we have the interior of our feature story. This is where your main text is going to go. You'll notice that none of our body text was on that opening spread, and that's done for a reason, because we want to draw our reader in, and sometimes giving them a lot of text is definitely going to deter them. So we just have to be careful. One of the keys is we have to make sure the text is in order, so be careful when you're adding your text boxes and filling them that you're keeping the story in order. Also, make sure that you're connecting those text boxes so that you don't have to worry about cutting and pasting. It should just go, you connect them all, and so if you move one box, make it bigger, make it smaller, make it wider, whatever it is, all that text will shift appropriately and you're not going to lose any content. So that's a key element. Text, of course, should be in paragraphs, and those paragraphs need to be indented. I know that seems really silly, but every semester, at least 2 people submit a project in which not a single paragraph is indented. So make sure that you're adding that. Other things that you might add are pull quotes from your story. There's some really good pull quote options from the story that you've been provided with for this class. Sidebar with relevant information. So over the years, people have picked information related to the national parks. When we've had a story like this, they've included sidebars about famous monuments for a different story that we had worked on in this class. So some people will add in extra information with a nice sidebar with relevant info. You might add shapes, you might have subheads in the story to kind of break it up, and you might include drop caps. I warn you not to overuse any of these things and probably not to use all of them all the time. So think about the organization, and of course, look at your publication that you've picked out to see what kind of elements that they add to their stories to add visual design and also to aid the reader in getting them from the start to the end. You will want pictures, of course, your folio line, and this is critical, more than just text on a page. So here we go. We have this second spread, so pages 3 and 4, if you will, of this feature story. And you can see here we have a repetition of our headline font, and it is used as a little intro to our lead. So the 10 days before our interview, that's the start of our lead sentence or lead graph. And so it's done in a similar style. It's big, it's bold, it creates a good amount of white space around it, which gives a nice break for our eyes and also doesn't make this page feel like it's just filled with text. Then we have, of course, this big photo. It's so fun, loving the colors. Cosmo has been really into lime green recently, which I absolutely love. And then you can see a repetition once again in that pull quote. We have part of that pull quote text highlighted and done in the same text as the headline and the lead beginning. And that just makes for a good amount of variety. Now, they do something kind of fun and funky with their paragraphs. I don't recommend taking that on quite yet. Next up, we'll see another story, once again out of Cosmo magazine. I want to show you because they have a lot of consistency in their design style and from month to month and feature to feature, because a lot of times people think features have to be so different all the time, and they really don't, because it can sometimes take away from the identity and branding of a publication. So once again, we're seeing the same font for the headline or title of this story. We're just seeing it used in a different way. So this one is called Deep Fake, and instead of having filled in text, it's just text with the stroke on it and no interior color. So kind of fun, kind of different to see. And then we have quite a lengthy subhead in this case. Do I think it's a little bit too long? Yes, but there was a lot of explanation that needed to go with this story. Also, if you didn't read this story, I recommend finding it online and reading it because it was a wild journey. Once we get into the interior, you can see the structure of the paragraphs is pretty typical and what we've been learning in class. But once again, you'll see the repetition of that same font from the headline used at the beginning for the beginning of the lead. So they're not doing the whole lead, they're not doing even the whole sentence of that lead, first sentence of that lead, but it creates a nice visual, and then they're repeating that same style down on the bottom right hand side. I know it's hard to see because of my little head box here, but you can kind of see, wrong hand, there you go, right there. You can see that font is used once again as well as a secondary font. There are 3 different font styles that are used on this page. You should never use more than 3 fonts on any spread and or page. The next up is a slightly different style of feature, and I want to show you this because I've mostly just shown you 2 examples from Cosmo. So this is from Texas Monthly, and they decided to do 2 different photos here on the front. One is a full bleed and one is a smaller photo with a black background, and they have split up their headline. So the Gulf's Secret Garden. Some people really love this style and some people not really into it. You can also see that they put their page number on the right hand side for the feature because of not having space for the folio on the bottom. This is definitely stylistic and they do repeat this style in other areas, but for consistency it's not ideal. You can also see here that we have a subhead that is on the right hand side in between the start and end of the headline, and then on the bottom right hand side, once again, right there, you can't see it because of my little box, but that's where their byline information is located. Now, they did something a little bit different with their paragraph structure, and they didn't make them even. So they have of course, they're doing the same thing that Cosmo was doing with starting out with the same font from their headline and using it for their lead. There's a lot of this going on. Design always works in trends, and so you'll see once one magazine does something, others will be like, ooh, we want to try it too. So what you'll see here is we have a narrow and then a wide, narrow for our text boxes for the body of the story. You'll also see kind of a stylized drop cap with that T starting on the 4th page or on the second spread, the second page of the second spread. You'll note that in this very narrow box right there, that is the caption for the photo. That is not body text. If you zoom in, you'll be able to see that it's done in a different text or a different font style to help separate it and make sure you understand that it's the caption for the photo that's above it and the photos that are right over there. Then they decided to have a much lighter page after that with just having this big photo. They once again have that caption in the very narrow text area near the photo, and then we have our regular text right there, and that's our body text. So just making sure that your reader understands where the different elements are. The next one, I'm just showing you the opening spread for this story because the rest of it was pretty typical. But we have just a photo on one side, and we actually start the story on this design on the first page. And it works well because it's balanced with a photo-heavy page on the opposite side of it. So you can see the Pope of Glop. That's the headline, and the subhead actually kind of introduces the title, if you will. So just a different structure. I like the use of fun font and great color. And the fun thing about this is it's just a typical font that they added a little droplet to it on Gloop to give it just a little bit of something extra. And then you can see on the bottom we have our byline information with our writer's name, the biggest, and then other information such as the photographer below that. This is from, I believe, Esquire magazine, but it could be, now I'm trying to remember where I grabbed it from. It could be GQ, but I think it's Esquire because it's done in the same style as Cosmo, and they're both owned by Hearst. So you can see here, we once again have a big photo to open up. That little line on the side over there, that is just the back of my slide, and the grays also are just from my slide style. You can see here that we have Up Trouble Mountain. It's all lowercase. Make sure you take a look at that font because we're going to see a repetition of that in a minute. Plus we have once again a very long subhead started, and then underneath it our byline information. And then here you can see the interior. Once again, that same font is used for the lead. And then I want to show this one because it makes good use of a secondary piece of information with that sidebar that's up at the top, snapshots of the 21st century. Really good, really nicely separated. You'll see it has a lot of white space around it, which is a great visual for our eye to say, hey, this is part of the story, but we want you to read it separately. And this is our last story that I want you to take a look at. I'm going to get this in 20 minutes, so I'm very proud of myself. This, of course, is about September 11th and about the Twin Towers. And you can see here, we rise or fall together, the use of having the word rise higher up and having that kind of golden color, and then the fall is down below. And we have just a little bit of a lengthy subhead here. We have a big picture that goes over halfway over the spread, so it goes all the way on page, the right side page, and then just a little bit into the left side page. But it has to go over enough to look intentional and not like an accident. And this is what the interior looks like. You can see a repetition of the color, the font style, and that same little line. And once again, you can see that little sidebar there, which is really nice, talking about a book related to this topic. And everything else, these are nice even columns. You can see the indents. You'll notice that they're the start of that third paragraph on the second page. You'll note that the first line is done all uppercase letters, the same way it's done at the start of this story, which is really nice because it creates division and helps separate the different pieces. Okay, almost made in 20 minutes. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great week and that this helps you get your project 1 done. Bye.